Good afternoon. My name is Ty Patten, and this is my new YouTube channel all about winning daily fantasy sports. Before I get started, I'd like to give you a little bit of information about myself, my process, and what you can expect from this channel moving forward. I do use various sources via the internet to gather my information, and it is my hope to use this information to help you as well as other DFS players who may not have the time or the resources needed to do the deep research to compete in daily fantasy sports. I won't simply just post a lineup, and I cannot guarantee that this research will provide winners, but I will guarantee you that it's going to be backed by statistics and facts. My goal is also to help you take and build player pools to plug into lineups so that you can build hopefully winning lineups in daily fantasy sports. I also plan to do a recap show on Tuesdays where we will look back on the research that I provided the previous week and see if it was valuable or not. This will help you as well as myself moving forward. A quick breakdown of the channel, what I'm planning to do. Of course, this is my first week, so it won't go this way this week. But moving forward, like I said, Tuesday will be a recap show, and I will also at that time take a first look at quarterbacks. Wednesday, I will do running backs. Thursday, I will do wide receivers and tight ends. Fridays, I'll take a quick look at defensive special teams and put the player pool together from the previous days, kind of like a summary. Saturday, I'll do a show and maybe build a couple lineups with the players that we have. Take a look at it if there's any injuries, weather concerns, and things like that. I do participate in daily fantasy sports primarily on DraftKings. My user ID is CowboyFan215. So if you ever see me, or if you ever see the Cowboy Fan 215, that's me. I have had some success in daily fantasy sports. Most recently, I won first place in March of this year in a fairly large GPP tournament that had over 29,000 entries. I had one entry and won first place. A couple years ago, I was in an NFL after four contest, the ones when all your players are pretty much done in the first game or things didn't go well in the first set of games. You always have 4 o'clock to fall back on. Well, I played in a GPP tournament that had over 20,000 entries. I played two entries and won first place in that one as well. I've also placed in various GPP contests. I have not won enough to where that could be my job, but I have had some success in those contests, the GPP large tournament, the 50-50, the double ups, head-to-head, as well as season long. To begin my research strategy, the way I do it, the first thing I do is I look at the Vegas lines. I take the lines, and what I want to do is I look at like the top 5 or 6 games that have the highest implied totals. For instance, this week, the highest implied total on the board is New Orleans at the Rams, 52.5 points. I take all, like I said, the top 5 or 6, and I just write them down. The reason I do this is I figure that if these teams are the highest projected games, then the players from these teams are going to be the ones that score the points. It's just kind of common sense. Doesn't always mean that if they're projected to score 52.5 points, that the game won't be 13-10. Like I said, there's no guarantees, but this is a starting point, and I can tell you that Las Vegas is not in the business of giving away money. So when I see a 52.5 point total, I don't think, oh well, it's nice. Vegas wants everybody to take the under so that they can give away some money. It doesn't work like that. The next thing I do is I start out and I break it down just like I'm going to break down this show. I look at the quarterbacks, the running backs, wide receiver, tight end, and I start formulating my player pools. And I do this over the course of a week instead of just at Sunday morning at noon, where I have an hour to put together a lineup and do a little bit of research or watch a show here and there to catch somebody on YouTube real fast. Um, when I take a first look at the quarterbacks, I'm looking for value. I'm looking for value of quarterbacks that are involved in these games where they have a high total, and not necessarily the quarterback um, who's the favorite. I don't always take that approach, and I'll show you that even this past week, the quarterbacks that were ended up being the highest, the top five, actually were not the ones that were projected to finish in the top five. Another thing I look at is the early numbers on projected ownerships. Now, early in the week, they're not going to be um, as valuable as later in the week. Um, but if you see that the public is going to be 40% on one player, you might want to look elsewhere, because that's how you win GPP contests. You don't always go with the flow. Um, like I told you, I want to look back at last week real quick and show you. This kind of helps explain my process moving forward. What I did is the top five projected quarterbacks last week were Mahomes, who finished fifth; Wentz, who was projected to be number two, finished eighth; Drew Brees was projected to finish third. He actually finished 12th. Jameis Winston was projected to finish fourth and actually finished 29th last week. And Deshaun Watson, who was a Monday night game, he wasn't on the main slate. He was projected to finish fifth, and he actually was one of the ones that moved up. He did finish third. Um, and that's something else that I have to mention. My builds are going to be primarily designed to focus on the main slate. I believe this weekend we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 games on the main slate. So back to the quarterbacks, and what I wanted to say was the top from the top five from the main slate were again Mahomes, Wentz, Winston, Newton, and Mayfield. That was the top five projected on the main slate last week. Only two of those actually finished in the top 10. Mahomes was fifth and Wentz was eighth. Winston, like I said, was 29th. Cam Newton finished 31st. Baker Mayfield, who was projected to be the fifth overall scoring quarterback on the main slate, actually finished 24th. The actual top five winning or top five quarterbacks based on points scored last week, excuse me, were Lamar Jackson with 36.56 points, Dak Prescott with 36.40 points, Deshaun Watson with 31.72, Matt Stafford with 31.60, and Mahomes with 30.32. The interesting thing about that is Jackson was projected to, who was number one, was projected to be 10th. Prescott, who finished second, was projected to be 12th. Watson, who's projected to be, I'm sorry, let me go back to that. Jackson was projected to be 10th and finished first. Prescott was projected to be 12th and finished second. Watson was the one that I said previously that he was projected to be fifth and moved up to third. Matt Stafford was projected to be 24th and moved up to and ended up being number 4. And Patrick Mahomes was projected to be number 1 and ended up being the 5th. The main slate top 5 quarterbacks scored an average of 33 points. Their average salary was $5,880 The main slate, um, that was the main slate quarterbacks that finished in the top five. The five of them together scored an average of 33 points, and their average salary was $5,880, compared to the projected top five scored an average of 17 points, and their salaries were $6,480. So you can see that the projected top five compared to where they ended up and the lower salary quarterbacks, there was some value there. So the recap on the main slate from last week, the top five average points were 33.02. Their average salary was $5,800. Four of the top five were away quarterbacks, which that's kind of odd. Oftentimes in my studies I focus on the home quarterbacks, but four of the five were actually away. One of the top five was a home favorite. That was Dak Prescott, and top four quarterback implied total had an average of 25. So the top four, because I took Keenum out, but the top four were actually had an implied total of 25 points. So again, you can look at the players involved in games that had high totals. Another interesting thing about this recap and looking back at it is, truthfully, it doesn't have anything to do with week number 2. Kind of an unwritten rule to remember is a team isn't always as bad as they looked, and the team isn't always as good as they looked either. In NFL, it can vary week to week. There will be some surprises this week. If this wasn't the case, we could just simply take last week's winning lineup and plug it in week to week and win. But it just doesn't work that way. So let's take a look at this week's quarterbacks. First, I'm going to give you the totals that I identified to begin my target offenses. Los Angeles Chargers at the Detroit Lions. Chargers are favored by 2.5. The game has a 48-point total. Dallas Cowboys at Washington. Dallas favored by 4.5. The game has a 46-point total. New England's at Miami. This is one that I talked about. New England is an 18.5-point favorite with a total of 48 points. Arizona is at Baltimore. Baltimore is a 13-point favorite with a game total of 47 points. Kansas City's at Oakland. Kansas City's an 8-point favorite with a 52-point total. New Orleans is at the Rams. The Rams are a 3.5-point favorite with a 52.5-point total. The lowest game is the Chicago at Denver with a 40.5-point total. The reason I mention that is there's nothing saying that won't be the highest scoring game, but that is the lowest is 40.5 points. So when we pull this out, the top, I can look at the top the quarterbacks from these teams with the highest implied totals. Tom Brady, 33-point implied total. Mahomes, 30-point implied total. Jackson, 30-point implied total. Newton, 28.3 implied total. Newton is actually a Thursday night game. So, Goff, 27.5 point implied total. Carson Wentz, which Wentz I believe is a Thursday night or Sunday night game, 26.5 point total. Watson, the game total is 43.5 points, but Houston has an implied total of 26.3 points. Prescott, 25.3. Roethlisberger, 25.3. Rivers, 21 point or 25.3, and Breeze 25 points. Um, so my early look on quarterbacks, I narrowed it down to Goff, Breeze, Mahomes, Brady, Prescott, and Jackson. After I did that, I went and looked at some quarterbacks that I feel may have some value based on game script, which is based on the total. A couple of the quarterbacks that I came up with were Fitzpatrick from Miami versus New England. He may have some value in the game script if they are projecting such a high total and such a high point spread. Obviously, Miami's going to be in comeback mode very early. And you could find some value in Fitzpatrick, who's only 4,700. I believe it's 4,700 on DraftKings. Yeah, right here, Fitzpatrick, $4,700 as an 18-point underdog at home, and a what did we say here? And a 48-point total. Another quarterback who could provide some value is Derek Carr. Derek is at home against the Chiefs, an 8-point underdog. And Carr is actually 51. I believe Carr is 5,100. Yeah. Derek Carr, $5,100 on DraftKings. And they too have the second highest total on the board at 52 points. And Derek Carr last week completed 22 of 26 attempts, 259 yards, and one touchdown, which was 14 fantasy points. And the last quarterback based on value that I'm looking at is Matt Stafford from Detroit, who's actually $5,200 on DraftKings. He's a 2.5-point underdog at home with a 48-point implied total. Now, when I looked at those, I was thinking about game script. If they're going to be behind, they're playing high-powered offenses. Behind, come back, garbage time points. Last week, actually, Matt Stafford scored 31.6 points. And he was 27 of 45 for 385 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no interceptions. So there you go. Some things to remember, like I said, I want to make sure I get this point across, is a team's not always as bad or as great as they look the previous week. The quarterbacks also on the value, if, like I said, I pull out the games with the highest totals, look at the players from those games, and on the flip side, if you look at game script, you can often find value players. A lot of people are looking at perhaps Mahomes, Mahomes is $7,500 this week. He's probably going to put up a lot of points. But if Mahomes puts up those points and I go down at 7,500 and I pick Derek Carr, who might not score as many points as Mahomes, but plugging Mahomes into the quarterback spot allows me to have more salary for other players and to build more balanced lineups. Some other early interests, as I mentioned, was Carr, Matt Ryan, which I believe that might be a Sunday night game. But he's a home underdog. And one of the things to look at is Keenum was actually a top 5 quarterback last week against the Philly defense. Now Philly's going on the road against Atlanta, who lost, and they have a 24.5 point team total. So the game script with the high over under makes Matt Ryan a target, but like I said, I believe he's a Sunday night or Monday night. Um, he's not on the main slate. Another early interest, Jared Goff. He's at home. The game script is the highest over under on the board, 52.5 points. Um, New Orleans defense was 31 against the quarterback last year as far as points per game. If you look down here, Goff, he's a little bit more expensive than the other ones that I mentioned, but 5,900 at home with the game script of a high scoring game, close. He could be a very valuable asset to your daily fantasy sports uh, lineup this week. So moving forward, um, when I come back with my running back show, we'll be looking at the early running back targets for the week, the value running backs. And this week, if you want to write down, and I'll also recap this, our early interest are Derek Carr, Jared Goff, um, Rivers and Stafford from the same game, uh, Fitzpatrick, and Breeze. So I will see you the next time. We will talk about running backs. If you'd hit the like button for me and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Until the next time, have a good day, and I'll talk to you a little later. Thank you.